Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by CuriosityStream. Ridley Scott's Gladiator had the kind of success that just doesn't happen very much anymore. It was both a smash hit when it opened in 2000 and went on to win Best Picture. Though many critics did have gripes with the film, overall it was received about as warmly as a big sword and sandals historical epic has ever been. Though it's far more violent than an old Hollywood studio system film would have been back in like 1950, I do think part of its success was how well it invoked the adventure, grandeur, and heroism of old films like Ben-Hur and Spartacus, while bringing the style and action set pieces more in line with what audiences were expecting at the turn of the century. Not that the action in those older films is bad, I think the chariot race in Ben-Hur is still a pretty spectacular stunt-filled set piece, but it's hard to deny that the violence is a lot more impactful and visceral here. But in terms of storytelling, I think audiences found Gladiator refreshingly old-fashioned, with a capable and tragic hero that's incredibly easy to root for, and a villain so malevolent and despicable you can't wait to see it all come crashing down around him. It's a crowd-pleasing and pretty universal story, which is one of the reasons I think it's interesting that making a sequel to it has proved so difficult, with one script written for it even being notoriously strange, involving Russell Crowe's Maximus being trapped in purgatory, being sent to kill Jesus Christ on behalf of the Roman gods, being cursed to live forever, and even working at the USA's Pentagon in present day. I want to dig into all of that, how we got there, why it didn't happen, and ultimately about the possibility of a Gladiator sequel happening now, which honestly looks a lot more likely than it has in years. But first, let's go back and lay the groundwork for that strange Gladiator sequel script.
Now on DVD.
My name is Gladiator.
Gladiator, like you've never seen it before. An all-new extended edition DVD.
One thing that's probably important to contextualize here is that the production of Gladiator was not a smooth one. Already a complicated shoot, splitting between filming in England, Malta, and Morocco, on-set injuries became a constant problem, as was the script. According to Russell Crowe, they ran out of scenes to shoot fairly quickly, with only 20-something pages of the script even being completed. Crowe was also unhappy with some of the dialogue, which he saw as stilted and awkward. This may have led to some clashes with director Ridley Scott. According to a producer, Crowe hated Maximus' speech that ended with, "And I will
have my vengeance, in this life or the next."
He believed it was overwrought and tried to improvise his way out of it for many takes before just giving up and doing the line. And then he apparently said, "It was shit, but I'm the greatest actor in the world and I can make even shit sound good." I should say though, for the record, Russell Crowe has denied that this ever happened. He will admit that he clashed with Oliver Reed, who played Proximo, and who died unexpectedly during production and had to be digitally replaced with CGI in a few scenes. Which, by the way, I actually think they pulled off really well with the 2000 tech that they had at their disposal. Anyway, all of this added up to a really troubled production. If a Gladiator sequel was going to be made, it seems that both Scott and Crowe wanted to change things up behind the scenes, starting with the screenwriter. According to Nick Cave on comedian Marc Maron's podcast in 2013, it was Russell Crowe who approached him asking to take a crack at a sequel script. This was an interesting move for a couple of reasons. The first, and something I probably should have already addressed in this video, is that Gladiator is a really hard movie to make a sequel to. At least one starring Crowe, because Maximus doesn't survive the film. Nick Cave says he asked Crowe, "Hey Russell, didn't you die in Gladiator 1? To which Crowe replied, "Yeah, you sort that out." The second reason is, at least at that time, Cave had only ever written one screenplay. It's definitely not what he's primarily known for. I've been a fan for years, but for those who don't know, Nick Cave is primarily known for his band Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Now, if the name doesn't sound familiar, you've probably still heard some of their stuff. They did Red Right Hand, which became the Peaky Blinders theme song. There's that scene in the second to last Harry Potter movie where Hermione and Harry share that charming little dance that's set to their song Oh Children. And in the Snyder Cut, Aquaman walks into the sea while There Is a Kingdom plays. I mean, I'm just scratching the surface here obviously, but the point is he's a really talented guy that's been making music for a very long time. But back in the mid-2000s, he did not have much screenwriting experience. So he decided to take a massive swing with an audacious concept. What was that concept? Well, I'll let Cave explain in his own words. Maximus goes down to purgatory and is sent down by the gods, who are dying in heaven because there's this one god. There's this Christ character down on Earth who is gaining popularity. And so the many gods are dying, so they send Gladiator back to kill Christ and his followers. I wanted to call it Christ Killer, and in the end you find out that the main character was his son, and so he has to kill his son, and he was tricked by the gods. He becomes this eternal warrior, and it ends with this 20-minute war scene which follows all the wars in history, right up to Vietnam and all that sort of stuff, and it was wild. The final scene was set in the present day, with Maximus working at the Pentagon, still having to fight and separated from his long-lost family. This was, I think it's fair to say, not what anyone would expect from a Gladiator sequel, and really, Cave's short description there was just the tip of the iceberg. The script has since leaked, and it features everything from Maximus battling in the Crusades to fighting a battalion of tanks in the Second World War, with his Pentagon job at the end continuing this hellish purgatory. The screenplay does contain a lot of strange and really interesting ideas, especially in its exploration of Christianity, a subject that Cave has written about many times in his music. I would also say that it does contain a lot of character development. There's a really poignant scene with Maximus and his son that I can easily picture Russell Crowe hitting out of the park. But ultimately, I think it's safe to say it probably wasn't going to satisfy those going in hoping for another film like Gladiator. Now, Ridley Scott has praised elements of the screenplay, but according to Cave, Russell Crowe was very much not sold on the idea. He recounted his conversation with the actor, saying that Crowe simply responded, "I don't like it, mate." "What about the end?" he asked, to which Crowe said, "Don't like it, mate." So that put an end to Nick Cave's very unique, very strange Gladiator sequel, but not to the project itself. A Gladiator sequel was reportedly greenlit in 2018 and then went dormant until earlier this year, when Ridley Scott claimed that it would be his next film after Kitbag, his upcoming Napoleon Bonaparte film starring Gladiator's Joaquin Phoenix. He seemed really confident about it too, saying, "It's already been written, we have a good footprint, a good logical place to go. You can't just do another Gladiator type movie, there's enough components from the first one to pick up the ball and continue it." The script is apparently from Top Gun Maverick's Peter Craig. I couldn't find any real story details, but I wouldn't be surprised if it centered on a completely different character. There's been rumors that Crowe wants to hand off the reins to fellow Australian Chris Hemsworth, but I take all those rumors with a grain of salt since he's never publicly said anything about it. Still, the almost 85-year-old Ridley Scott does seem really committed, saying it'd be critically stupid of him not to make the movie. I'll be honest, that does seem pretty odd to me, considering that the first film doesn't really call for a sequel at all, but I'll always be up to hope for the best, and honestly, I'm more excited now for a possible sequel than I would have been 5-6 years ago. Movies like Robin Hood and Exodus: Gods and Kings seem to point to Ridley Scott kind of losing his touch on large-scale historical epics. But The Last Duel was pretty great. Sure, there's no guarantee that he's gonna pull it off, but it feels like he's more than earned the right to try at this point. But I'd be willing to bet that whatever we eventually get will be very different than the Nick Cave script. And he seems totally fine with that, saying, "I enjoyed writing it very much because I knew on every level that it was never going to get made." But now I want to know what you think. Would you have liked to see Cave's script filmed? Are you excited at the prospect of another Gladiator with a different story than that? Or do you think this should all just be left alone? Honestly, any of those responses would make a lot of sense to me, and I'll be reading your thoughts down in the comments. If you're still in a Gladiator mood, I've got a recommendation: Roman Megastructures, a documentary series that does a great job of tracing the history of ancient Rome through its architecture. You can watch that right now on Curiosity Stream. This is a documentary streaming service that has you covered on just about everything, with their docs on science, nature, tech, and way more. We're talking thousands and thousands of documentaries. And it comes in a great bundle with my streaming service, Nebula. So okay, just last week, WB demonetized my Black Adam video, which does tend to happen if I negatively review one of their movies. Stuff like that just isn't an issue on Nebula, and that's part of why it's so great for creators. It's amazing for viewers too, as it cuts out ads entirely. All my videos are on there ad-free, and it gives you exclusive content from creators like Patrick H. Willems, Nando V Movies, H Bomber Guy, and so much more. So sign up to Curiosity Stream and you'll receive an email welcoming you to the Streamy award-winning Nebula as well. Get both services for just $14.79 for an entire year. Sign up now by going to curiositystream.com/CaptainMidnight. That's curiositystream.com/CaptainMidnight.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes, too.